first encounter with Gülen, what had you expected? Yeah? Well, you would have had,
yes,
in the back of your mind, some expectation of
right,
something.
right,
I'm going to meet someone who I've read an awful lot about.
right.
What was the first
So,
reaction?
so to begin with, the first book, I had never met him when I wrote the first book. So it was based entirely on what I had read either by him or about him. The consequence of which is that when I did go to see him for the first time, I already had certain expectations based on what had become the beginnings of a love affair based on his writings and his thinking.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you meet someone for the first time whom you've admired from afar, you know, some star, a movie star, a sports star, something of that sort, and then you meet that person and it's so disappointing because they prove to be so much less than what you had expected. In his case, it was the opposite. He was exponentially more than I expected. It was really transformative. My sense of his charisma as a human being, my sense of his genuine humility, my sense of his absolute concern for others rather than for himself. And I'm not naive. I've met plenty of people in the course of my life who pretend to be humble, who are not, who pretend to be concerned about others, who are not. We have a half a dozen at least different world leaders today who play that game of pretending to care about the country they lead, but they don't care about the very country they lead. They care about themselves. So he was different from all of that. And that was truly the beginning of my love affair with Fethullah Gulen and the Hizmet movement. Because up to that point, you might say it was still tentative, right? It was based on what I'd read, so I was writing based on that. It was based on his thinking. As I said, in particular, the relationship with Rumi, Jalaluddin Rumi, the 13th century Sufi poet, and others, but it became much more, how shall I put it, personal after I met him. And subsequent times, each time I've met him, that sense has been reconfirmed, as opposed to, oh, well, beginner's luck the first time, you know. But each time that sense has been reaffirmed. And then, of course, as I've watched and gotten to know more and more people involved with the Hizmet movement, what it is that he is all about, as you said as well, in terms of doing things for others, has become just repeatedly confirmed.
When was the last time you saw him?
November.
Okay.
Yes.
And how's his health?
His health is iffy, but I did get to see him. It was a weekend, in fact, it was a very important weekend, not only personally because I did get to see him, because he wasn't seeing many people that weekend, but because there was a whole conclave of Hizmet leaders from around the United States that were at his complex that weekend, and I had conversations with them because he spent minimal of time because his health was not that good. But what the takeaway, the most important takeaway, which has to do less with past and present than with future, is that they kept saying, you know, he's much less, he is far less giving us advice now than he did in the past. He's stepping away from that kind of direct involvement. And as you said, it's not just that I want people to think for themselves, I don't want them to think what I think, but he also very clearly in his wisdom has recognized that Hizmet, as it is disseminated across the planet, its leaders, people like Ahmed, you know, have to figure out for themselves what needs to be done and not count on him. So he remains a very important, of course, kind of éminence grise, but he's less involved directly, which means that when he is gone, the movement will continue to flourish.
So there's no succession plan, so to speak.
No.
But in a very, very exciting way, he's already given us enough, as a scope, enough food for thought to hold the next layer of scholar
Yes.
in his
Yes.
entourage, giving them every opportunity to expand what they're
And
doing.
he's the last person who would want a successor, because a successor would mean that he's a leader, and that's not the way he thinks of himself.